Welcome to Chapter 14, Part 1, Hierarchical Cluster Analysis. In this section, we will explore hierarchical clustering, a key unsupervised data mining technique. Let's get started. By the end of this chapter, you will be able to conduct hierarchical cluster analysis. Conduct k-means cluster analysis.n. Conduct association rule analysis. Unsupervised data mining requires no knowledge of the target variable. The algorithms allow the computer to identify complex processes and patterns without any specific guidance from the analyst. It is an important part of exploratory data analysis because it makes no distinction between the target variable and the predictor variables. We will explore two core unsupervised data mining techniques: cluster analysis and association rule analysis using similarity measures such as Euclidean, Manhattan, and Jacquard's. Cluster analysis is an unsupervised data mining technique that groups data into categories that share some similar characteristic or trait. Observations are similar within a cluster and dissimilar across clusters. It uses similarity measures and is useful for exploratory analysis by summarizing a large number of observations into a small number of clusters. Cluster characteristics or profiles help us understand and describe the different groups. It is often performed prior to supervised learning techniques to help separate observations that display very different patterns. We will explore two common clustering techniques: hierarchical clustering and k-means clustering. Cluster analysis is an unsupervised data mining technique that groups data into categories that share some similar characteristic or trait. Observations are similar within a cluster and dissimilar across clusters. It uses similarity measures and is useful for exploratory analysis by summarizing a large number of observations into a small number of clusters. Cluster characteristics or profiles help us understand and describe the different groups. It is often performed prior to supervised learning techniques to help separate observations that display very different patterns. We will explore two common clustering techniques: hierarchical clustering and k-means clustering. With Agnes, each observation initially forms its own cluster. The algorithm then merges these clusters into larger clusters based on their similarity, continuing until all observations are merged into one final cluster, referred to as the root. It uses dissimilarity measures such as Euclidean distance or Manhattan distance for numeric variables, and Jacquard's coefficient or matching coefficient for categorical variables. The Agnes algorithm also needs to measure the distance between an observation and a cluster or between clusters. The algorithm uses one of several linkage methods to evaluate dissimilarity between clusters. Single, nearest distance between a pair of observations not in the same cluster. Complete, farthest distance between a pair of observations not in the same cluster. Centroid, distance between the center centroid or mean values of the clusters. Average distance between all pairs of observations not in the same cluster. Wards uses error sum of squares, ESS, which measures the loss of information that occurs when observations are clustered. Once Agnes completes the clustering process, data are usually represented in a tree-like structure called a dendrogram. Branches represent clusters, and an observation is a leaf. We visually inspect the clustering result and determine the appropriate number of clusters. The height of each branch or subbranch indicates how dissimilar it is from the other branches or subbranches with which it is merged. When a large distance to merge subclusters is detected, it suggests the presence of distinctive clusters. We may cut the dendrogram tree horizontally. The dendrogram presented here shows 2 clusters at a cutoff value of 15 and 4 clusters at a cutoff value of 7. The number of clusters are graphically represented by the branches that run vertically and intersect the cutoff line. Relying solely on the height of a dendrogram tree branch may lead to statistically distinctive clusters that have little or no practical meaning. We often take into account both quantitative measures such as a dendrogram and practical considerations to determine the number of clusters. We should also review the profile of each cluster using descriptive statistics. Another common approach to profile clusters is to incorporate variables that were not used in clustering but are of interest to the decision maker. The ability of a clustering method to discover useful hidden patterns depends on how it is implemented. data transformations, distance measures, algorithm, and linkage. Try several techniques and use the one that makes the most sense. Let's look at an example using the crime rate. Crimes per 100,000 residents, the poverty rate in percent, and the median income in $1,000s for 41 cities in the United States. Upload the cities file from your computer into JASP. Select Machine Learning, and under Clustering, select Hierarchical. Move crime, poverty, and income into the Variables box and select the options under Tables, Plots, and Training Parameters as indicated in the screenshot. Because we scaled the variables, the means provided in the tables are standardized. To get non-standardized means for the 3 variables across the 3 clusters, we will do a descriptives analysis next. Select the Descriptives tab on the top ribbon. Move crime, poverty, and income to the Variables box. Move cluster to the Split box. Under Statistics, select the options as presented in the screenshot. The resulting number of observations per cluster and the means of each variable across each cluster align with the results as presented in the textbook example. We now extend the analysis with data consisting of both numerical and categorical variables referred to as mixed data. Mixed data are often of interest in business applications. To measure the distance between 2 observations with mixed data, use Gower's coefficient. Proposed by John C. Gower, this distance measure converts the value of each variable into a 0-1 scale and calculates a weighted average of the scaled distances as a measure of similarity between 2 observations. The main appeal of hierarchical clustering is that it does not require the pre-specification of the number of clusters. It is purely data-driven, easy to understand and interpret. However, it evaluates individual observations to merge or split them in each iteration, making it inherently slow and not scalable to large data sets. This poses a major challenge when dealing with big data. The method is also not stable, as the interpretation may change with even a small change in the sample data. To overcome these limitations, practitioners often combine hierarchical clustering with other, more efficient clustering techniques. This concludes the lecture on hierarchical clustering. Thank you for your attention.